welcome to No Broken Legs. I am your host, Evan Belfiore, and we continue our journey of the 2023 NFL preseason by looking at the AFC West. And joining me, as always, to do that is Jimmy Champ. Jimmy, how are you on this Thursday night?
Man, I'm feeling good. I'm as confident as some of the things we're going to talk about as the Patriots are in Mac Jones, bud.
Yeah, I guess Mac Jones is going to be the only New England quarterback.
Just so they could get that eighth linebacker on the roster.
The Cleveland Browns cut down to 53. They've made some moves that I think made a lot of people happy. I think, Ron Brown was probably dancing around just having a ball when he saw that Schwartz got cut and York did too.
These were necessary moves.
Those guys can't play. Cade York just looked shot. Like, he looked like he didn't know how to kick anymore, and him going to Tennessee tells me that he didn't feel like he was going to relearn anything here in Cleveland, regardless of who's coaching special teams.
Yeah, the Schwartz thing there had to be done. It surprises me. I think the Cade York thing had to be done as well, but it surprises me they did it because they wasted so much draft capital on him.
Yeah, but that's Jimmy. This is the Cleveland Browns.
This is true.
Nobody wastes anything like the Cleveland Browns. Seasons, draft capital. I mean, they took running backs in back-to-back years in the late rounds with Felton, who just got cut, and Ford, who doesn't seem like he can get on the field. So I don't know. I guess I'm less critical of them taking Schwartz and Bell as wide receivers, because that's a position of need. At least you're trying to address the problem.
Yeah.
The Felton and Ford picks don't address any problem. I don't get that, so it just seems like there's more picks out the window, but it does seem like they have somebody in our boy Big Thanos. That dude just, like, he's so big, and I think they may have gotten a steal because, I don't know, he wanted to play in the NBA when he was 12, so that affects how he plays football now, apparently.
Right.
Was there anything super surprising to you with this roster? I know you had mentioned Harrison Bryant. He did make this roster even though he's been hurt. Anything that stood out?
That surprises me. I don't quite understand holding three tight ends when you're limited in depth on defense. I guess it just means you didn't have any defensive players.
But they kept 27 defensive players and 23 offensive players, at least to start. I know there's been some other moves, so I'm not exactly sure where they stand in that, because the NFL has really weird rules with, like, you put your players on, like, you cut your players, and then if they pass through, if nobody claims them, the NFL will let you know. But if you're claimed, the player will just be told they're claimed, and the player and the team don't know who gets who yet. Like, there's this lag period, which is really bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything that was really shocking or surprising to me, except, so far in his career, Nick Chubb has been super healthy. I don't know if I'm super happy with Jerome Ford as the number 2 running back. And the quarterback moves.
Do you think he's really the number 2 back, or do you think it's going to be more Pierre Strong?
I don't know. I mean, probably more Strong, but I'm going by what Stefanski listed, right? And they have Ford as the 2. Who knows?
Okay. I mean, he's not playing right now, so I guess that's Maybe they're doing that thing where it's like, no, we got to make Strong earn it. Like,
right,
I don't know.
Right, and I don't know did Dorian Thompson-Robinson show you enough to be warranted as the only other quarterback on the roster?
I'm fine with it. They got a little draft capital back for. What's his name, Jimmy? Help me.
For Dobbs.
Yeah. I mean, how much of a difference is there between DTR and
Yeah,
and
yeah, no,
Hobbs?
absolutely.
It just okay. You got a 5th-round pick back. You get a little draft capital, and they're going to need that because they're $1 billion over the cap for next year.
Yeah,
I was listening to Daryl Ryder earlier, and they're I think $70 to $80 million. I think he said they're $80 million over the cap already, and then they'll restructure Watson and get another 10 or so back. So they're looking at about a $70 million cap hit. So them clearing all this cap space is very much about carrying that over to next year to minimize that hit, which really puts a big onus on them being good this year, because if they're going to take their cap medicine next year and they end up missing the playoffs this year, that's it's just the worst case scenarios on the board with this team. And that just, it's like, it just, like, that would be devastating to this franchise, and it would be devastating to the fan base. I don't know. They'd have to pull some magic in the offseason if that ends up being the case to get people excited again.
yeah. But I hope he gets a little bit of time to play so they can figure out if he's a keeper or not. But I do like that David Bell made the 53. The secondary, I mean, I'm going to stay concerned in the secondary until they stay healthy and stay successful. That's just how I'm.
It's really getting concerning with Ward.
Like,
and you hear that in the reporting of this.
Yep. With Ward,
this is what, four head injuries in the pros, and we don't know how many in college, how many in high school. I mean, this is the same type of stuff we talk about with Tua. It's very scary.
Yeah, and we are, well, it's always been kind of the podcast as a whole, although you went a little different, but we're normally glass half empty with the Cleveland Browns, and there's definite concern on my part about what if Emerson takes a step back. What if Newsome doesn't get any better? Like, these things concern me, along with Ward's head injuries. So it's the front seven are going to have to be spectacular. I think that's just what it's going to come down to defensively.
Going to be very good. The question is, what injuries are going to befall them, because they have like zero depth on the defensive line. And if Tomlinson ends up missing a 5-game stretch, and it's one of those stretches where they play 3 good teams, are you just scratching and clawing to go 2-3? Like 1-4 is on the board. Like, the AFC is going to be good. I know somebody's going to win 9 games and get that 7 spot, but you're going to have to beat a lot of AFC teams to do it. This was a team that couldn't beat any AFC teams last year. So, and I guess to pivot back to what you were saying about backup quarterback, like, if Watson's not good or if he gets hurt and they have to play DTR for a long stretch, they're fucked. Like, that's just where we are in the NFL. I know Shanahan seems to get away with it. They got a ton of weapons. He's got a good system, and he has a history of being good with marginal quarterbacks. I mean, we all remember Brian Hoyer was 7-4 on this team, and then the Johnny Manziel train came to town.
Yep.
Sigh.
Now, have you heard, looking at the roster, and I truthfully didn't hear what the verdict was, what is the status of Anthony Walker?
He came back on a 1-year deal. I think I heard Daryl Ryder say they kept 7 linebackers.
Yeah.
And 9 offensive linemen, I think he said too, which was pretty crazy. But we'll see if that ends up being the case. They may move some guys, like they did for Pierre Strong.
Yeah.
Cade York is gone, and in comes a kicker who used to play for the Chargers, who have had their own kicking problems in the past, although he was 9-10 last year before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Does the new kicker make you reconsider in any way your Browns under 9.5?
No.
Okay. It made me feel better about my Browns over 9.5. I'll tell you that much.
No, I'm staying pat.
Okay.
I don't.
Joe
Well,
Burrow. I mean, Joe Burrow's out there looking very swag.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I fully expected 2 of the losses to be because of Cade York. So I don't know.
So now they're maybe to like 9-10. Now they're like right there.
No, I'm holding. I'm staying. This is where I'm gonna be. I'm just gonna stay over here and hopefully be happily surprised.
All right. Any final thoughts on the Browns here before we get to the AFC West?
No, I think if Deshaun Watson is good and he doesn't have to be great, I don't think he can be great. A lot of people think he can be great. I don't think he can be great again, but if he can be good, there are some skill position players. I still don't know if I trust Stefanski to understand how to balance Watson and Chubb. I agree with you. I think the defensive line could be incredible, but I am worried about Taki and the secondary. So, but they upgraded significantly at a couple positions. We're just going to have to see what the lack of depth does to the roster.
Yeah, that's probably the big key, and that seems to be what it is every year in the NFL. There's at least 2-3 teams that get hit with a big injury bug, and it's just not something they can overcome.
Yeah.
The Browns seem to be making mostly smart moves, but they still have that sort of Damocles over their head with the Watson trade and going all in, and making the first round of the playoffs or even the second round of the playoffs doesn't seem to be enough.
Yep.
But we'll just see what they look like. I still feel like by week 6, I'm still feeling good about them getting to 10, maybe even 11 wins with a better kicker, because I think the defense, we talked about it with Ron about Myles Garrett. We say it every year. This is the year he's going to really blow up. Like this is probably it. If this isn't the year, you wouldn't expect him to do it next year. So that defensive line is turning a lot of heads. We've had this conversation in preseasons before, so I guess we'll have to see what happens against Cincinnati in week 1.
Yep. That'll be a great litmus test to start the season.
Absolutely. Especially for that D-line. If they're getting a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow, then that solves a lot of problems in your second and third level of your defense.
Absolutely.
Let's now turn our attention to the AFC West, the last of the AFC divisions. This is where the Kansas City Chiefs reside, and it has been their division lockstep for as long as I can remember. Andy Reid just dominates his divisions. He did this when he was in Philadelphia in the NFC East, and he continues to do it now with Kansas City. And it's no surprise that they're not only the favorites in the division, they are the Super Bowl favorites at plus 600. To win the conference, they are plus 350. To win their division, minus 160. And to make the playoffs, yes is minus 450, no is plus 400. Their over-under sits at 11.5, minus 130 for the over, plus 110 for the under. Jimmy, the AFC West plays the AFC East and the NFC East this year. Do you think the Kansas City Chiefs win more or fewer than 11.5 games?
I really have them sitting in the 13 to 14 wins category, so I'll be taking the over. I'll also be taking them to make the playoffs, win the division, win the conference, win the Super Bowl. I don't know yet if I think they'll win the Super Bowl, but you will never – the odds now are going to be probably the best you're going to get on them to win the Super Bowl all year. So if you think they have a chance, you might as well bet it now.
Agreed. You can get a plus 200 boost on DraftKings right now for your Super Bowl winning bet. It is a $10 max, but hey, man, take it where you can get it. That would be plus 800 for the Chiefs, so a $10 bet would get you $80 in profit if the Chiefs do win. I am with you. I think they're the class of the AFC. They continue to prove that. All those rookies on defense last year held up. You would expect at least a couple of those guys to get better, so even if some of them get worse, it should kind of even out. I am pretty worried about Chris Jones, but I think he's going to be back in the lineup to play. I also think Nick Wright is being ridiculous, thinking they can go undefeated. I think that schedule is just far too hard. The AFC East is a really good conference, and the NFC East has some good teams. It wouldn't be I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chiefs drop some of those games. We've seen them drop regular season games. And everybody freaks out because, oh my God, they're 6-3, and then they rattle off 7 wins in a row, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and they're really fucking good. They run this conference. We'll talk about the Chargers here in a second, but yeah, I think betting them for anything is a smart move. I think that over 11.5 is another bet, like the Bills in the NFC, like the Bills in the AFC East to win the division. Like, it just feels like stealing. That feels too easy. And if that's how they want to play it, then so be it. I've made that bet, and I've put my money on them to win the Super Bowl. They're one of the few teams that I think can actually win it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still a cream of the crop team. I imagine Kadarius Toney will be used more this year. So, I mean, I think you line Kadarius Toney up with Travis Kelce. I don't know how the defense stops that. I wouldn't be surprised if Sky Moore takes another step up. I still think MVS is pretty good. You know, I like
he's
Pacheco.
Fine.
Yeah, I mean, I like Pacheco.
Yeah.
I think offensively they're good.
He gives them a toughness.
Yep, and defensively they've just got defensively, they kind of, to me, they feel like a little bit of the opposite of the Browns, and where all of their talent is like right up the middle of the defense.
Yeah.
Where it's just like everybody has talent on the edge, including the Chiefs. Less talent without Chris Jones. I mean, you got to just be honest about that. I mean,
he's a big piece.
They should get a deal done, but he's a big piece of it. But just, you know, they're really good in the middle of their defense at every level, and I think that makes a difference. It takes away what a lot of offenses in the league like to do. So, but I agree with you. I mean, I think they're a top 3 team in the AFC, which makes them a top 3 team in the NFL. Like, they're just, as long as they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, things are going to go well. I think Andy Reid being able to bring Matt Nagy back as a coordinator helps out the transition, because there really isn't a transition. He's just able to step right back into his old role.
Yeah, it's one of the rare instances where normally somebody like Eric Bieniemy that we've been calling to be a head coach leaving a team, we'd think that would matter, but I don't think much of Matt Nagy as a head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, he's clearly capable of doing the job, especially if he's there with Andy Reid.
Yeah, so yeah, I think the Chiefs, but I do agree with you. Like, I don't look at their schedule. I don't see how they could get past 14. They just play too many good teams. But I don't really see how they get less than 12 or 13. So.
Yeah. There was... I totally agree with all that. Luke shared one of those projection websites that had the Eagles leading the league with 11 wins. And this, not to call you out, Luke, I think a lot of these projections are similar, where they underestimate how good the good teams will be, and they overestimate how bad the bad teams will be. And I think there's a lot of value there, because I think those projections sort of reflect a general reality that people think about when they bet. Nobody's coming into this season going, oh yeah, like somebody's going to win 15 games. Like, we didn't think we thought Philadelphia would be good. You thought they'd be really good, but they still won 2 more games than you thought they would. I think you had them at 14 and they won 16.
Yeah,
it's like that's in the NFL, a 2-game difference is quite a bit. Yeah. So I think that's a general noise that happens in the data. We've seen a half dozen teams win more than 11 games each of the last 3 years, and I think we'll see that again this year. But you've only got, 3? Yeah, because Buffalo's 10.5, Cincinnati's 11.5, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. So those teams that are going to be good, confidently bet the over here, people. We generally see half a dozen teams win 3-4 more games than that. The team that is always second to the Kansas City Chiefs, it seems, in recent years are the LA Chargers. They're second in LA, and they're second in the AFC West. They are plus 2,500 to win the Super Bowl. They are plus 1,400 to win the conference. To win the division, the Chargers are plus 300. To make the playoffs, yes is minus 106, no plus 120. Their over-under sits at 9.5, minus 110 for the over, plus 120 for the under. Jimmy, it seems like, kind of like with Myles Garrett, this is the year we ask again, like, is this the year Justin Herbert finally wins a playoff game?
100% yes.
Okay, I could ask that question better too, because so you're with them on the over.
Yes, I think the Chargers will also win more than 11 games.
Wow.
I just looking at the roster that the Chargers have put together, I think they're going to be really, really good. And I think Kellen Moore on the sidelines with Brandon Staley might be able to dial back Staley's fucking crazy a little bit. Like, Kellen Moore might be able to say, no, dog, we need to kick a field goal here. No, dude, we need to punt this ball. Like, I think that's all that's holding them back. Like, I absolutely love the roster. To me, they drafted Kellen Allen's heir apparent and Quentin Johnston. Mike Williams still there, very good. They have a very good young offensive line with Corey Linsley as the anchor. Austin Eckler, to me, is still a top 5 running back in the league. And I just think defensively they just continue to get better. They've added a lot of veterans to go with the talented youth. If the AFC Championship game, depending on how the bracket goes down, if the AFC Championship game was Chargers-Jaguars, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, the AFC is just stacked, and here we are talking about Justin Herbert after talking about the other divisions, and you have Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert, and 3 of those guys are not going to play in the conference championship game. At least 3 of those guys aren't, which is pretty crazy to think about. Yeah. The Chargers, I'm with you. I'm taking the over. This team won 10 games last year. I think they got at least a little better. It just seems like every year they try to address their problems on defense, but there's something missing with their scheme or with their roster. And if it's a roster problem, Staley has not figured out how to solve it schematically. And if it's a schematic problem, I don't know what changing the roster is going to do to help. You would think this team at 10-7 would have great numbers, but only a 7-point difference in points for and points against last year, 391 to 384. They seem to have a lot of weird shit happen to them. Joey Bosa, he just doesn't seem to be able to stay healthy for long periods of time, and they look like a very different team when he's on the field versus when he's not on the field. And they play, and it's just, they play, I forget who plays more home games this year versus who plays the extra road game, but it doesn't really matter for the Chargers because half their home games are road games, and then the rest of them are basically neutral site games. Like that, not having a home turf, I think, really hurts them, and it's they're going to have to overcome that. If they make a Super Bowl run, then fans in LA will start paying attention, but they're going to have to earn their way into the playoffs and start getting some wins before that happens. And by then, maybe they host a first-round playoff game, but if it's against somebody like the Browns, the Steelers, or the Ravens, you can guarantee those guys, those fan bases are going to travel. That's just what they do.
Probably the worst thing for them would probably be to host a playoff game.
Yeah, they're better off being on the road, which is
at least if you're on the road, you know what to expect. Yeah.
Oh, they'll have the extra home game. They'll have the extra home game this year because they had the AFC teams had 9 road games last year.
Yeah, I agree with you about the health, and you have to go into the season hoping to stay healthy, but if they'll continue to fail if Bosa and Derwin James continue to be injured. I want to see them both healthy for a whole season together. I love Khalil Mack and Eric Kendricks, who they got from Minnesota, in the middle of the defense. I think it's just excellent. They got J.C. Jackson from New England, to play in the secondary next to Derwin James. I think this roster, if they're able to stay healthy at those key spots, I think they're as good as the Chiefs. I really do, and
Wow.
I really believe that. I think Herbert, he's definitely in that third tier or second tier. If you want to put Mahomes and Burrow together in one, I'm fine with that. Whatever. But he's in that second or third tier. But we've seen him be so good in moments, and I think that'll just continue, and it'll be better this year. I really like the feel of the team. I like the way their schedule broke down. I think they've got a lot of spots where they can stack wins. I think the Chargers are going to be a little bit of a problem this year for the AFC.
Wow. I think they're just going to be one of those second tier teams that's a huge pain in the ass to get by if you're one of the top teams. No, I mean that. I think if the Chargers make the Super Bowl this year, I'm not going to be shocked.
Right.
I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Right.
And the reason I would just be surprised is because there's so many good teams ahead of them, and they just haven't done it yet. And there's just so much weirdness going on with them in general. I like them in the regular season, but something about them in the playoffs, they've got some of that Browns bad mojo shit going on. I don't know.
I think if the Chargers made a deep run in the playoffs, you'd be able to look at their season and go, okay, Brandon Staley stopped doing dumb shit, and they actually stay healthy. Like, I think those are the two things holding this team back. One of them you can fix, one of them you can't. I really do believe Kellen Moore will be able to dial Brandon Staley back a little bit. I think this team is going to be very, very good. To me, I may have them a step above Buffalo and whoever comes out of the AFC North. I might consider them the third best team in the AFC.
Wow. That's how everybody's been talking about him. Herbert got the big deal. Like, that's what they expect. So now it's, another team that has to deliver. They have to get a playoff win, or Staley's going to get fired. Because we all thought he was going to get fired this year, but apparently the owner couldn't afford to pay two coaches, so he just didn't.
Yeah, right. And with Kellen, I know you've brought Kellen Moore in as the OC, so you've got the succession plan if you do fire Brandon Staley. So So then again, maybe Kellen Moore will be over there like, yeah, you should go for it, but who knows.
A team that had no problem paying a lot of money to a head coach was the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton gets the bag after just spending a year in media ripping everybody in the NFL, and then he gets hired and just starts ripping Nate Hackett, which, he didn't say anything that wasn't fair.
No, you're right.
The Denver Broncos come into the 2023 campaign plus 5,500 to win the Super Bowl, plus 3,300 to win the conference, plus 650 to win the division, minus 210 no to make the playoffs. Yes is plus 200. Their over-under sits at 8.5. Even money on the over, minus 114 on the under. Jimmy, does Sean Payton make the Denver Broncos winners? Do they win more or less than 8.5 games?
So the first thing that has to be said is there is no team that got more of an upgrade at any position than the Broncos did at head coach. None. No team. No team got better at a position like the Broncos did at head coach. That being said, I still think they're like a 6-win team this year. So I'm taking the under. I think they're going to lose 4 games to Kansas City and the Chargers. They might get 2 against the Raiders. I don't think they're decidedly better than any of those teams in the NFC East. So I don't think they're going to have a great season. We're both kind of out on Russell Wilson. I do still like Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, but I'm kind of out on Russ. I think this team, their ceiling is like 7 wins. So I am happy with the under here.
I agree. I don't think this team's very good. I know everybody talks about how great their defense is. They're depending on what metrics you use, they're one of the 30 teams in the league that's a top 5 defense. I don't. Russ has to run for them to be really good, and Russ doesn't want to run. And I don't know, like Sean Payton's offense isn't going to force him to do that. And I don't think Russell Wilson's game is throwing 45 short passes like Drew Brees did. Now, if he tries to do that, if he can figure out a way to make that work, then then maybe there's a possibility they could be all right. But I just don't think this team's very good. And man, that looks like a vision of what the Browns could really be staring down if Watson just can't regain what he had. Because Russell Wilson's a few years older. He didn't have the layoff, but Russell Wilson looks like the league is just kind of passed him by. And he was, no offense to Russell Wilson, he's just not physically as big and elusive, elusive, I should say.
Well, and Ev, I think a lot of it comes back to something you have hit on. A few other analysts across the world have hit on it as well, but it's something you've talked about at length, right? Defenses are out there trying to prepare and get ready for Josh Allen.
Yeah.
If you can be ready for Josh Allen, you can stop Russell Wilson.
Yep.
And I think that's just what it comes down to. Like where Russ's skill set was unique a handful of years ago, there's not much he can do now that most quarterbacks in the league can't do. Like he doesn't have that, and
plus they can run better.
And I agree with you. I don't know how he's going to buy into what we assume Sean Payton is going to want him to do.
Yeah.
So,
and
it'll be interesting.
For those listening, if you think running's not important anymore, in that 2020 campaign when the Browns won a playoff game and made the playoffs, like there were some big games there where Baker ran, like they had designed runs for Baker to get big first downs. Now that ain't his game, and that's probably not how you make a living if you're Baker Mayfield as a quarterback. But that is a great example of how important the running game is. Even if you are, a guy that's supposed to be throwing the ball primarily, you still have to be able to get some runs. It just seems to be where the league is now. When you're playing the best defenses, you have to be able to attack them in so many different ways. And I just don't see this Denver team being able to do that.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said. I don't think – I look at their defensive roster. This is not the same defense from the last couple of years. I don't think they have the players they had before, the depth they had before. I don't think this team is very good. Like I said, I got them around that 7-win mark, and I just think that's where they're going to stay. Well, now, I think if you get a quarterback in there that can play Sean Payton football, I think in the next couple of years they could take a resurgence.
Yeah, well, that's going to be difficult because Russell Wilson's extension doesn't kick in until next year.
Oh, my. Poor Denver.
I know, right?
Oh, shucks.
Well, talking about teams that stink, the Las Vegas Raiders are plus 10,000 to win the Super Bowl, plus 6,500 to win the conference, plus 1,800 for the division. They are pretty much the opposite of the Chiefs when it comes to making the playoffs. No is minus 475. Yes, plus 425. Their over-under sits at 6.5. Plus 120 on the over, minus 130 on the under. Does Jimmy Garoppolo continue his winning ways as a quarterback, Jimmy? Do the Las Vegas Raiders win more or fewer than 6.5 games?
I think they're a 5-win team as well, so I'm taking the under here. I think we're going to find out real quick if Garoppolo is the guy or not. I do like a lot of their weapons on offense, except for Austin Hooper, who I think we have a blood feud with for the rest of time. I think the front of the defense is really talented. Max Crosby, very good. But I don't think the secondary is very good, especially in the division they're playing in. And I don't believe in Josh McDaniels, and I don't really believe in Garoppolo. So I think it's a 5-win team. I think they're going to lose. They're going to lose a lot of games, and a lot of people are going to think they're going to win.
I echo everything you just said. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is very good. I think what we saw from Brock Purdy is exactly what we expected another just competent quarterback to be able to do. And I think he's going to have a lot of problems because I also don't think Josh McDaniels is a very good coach.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I think this is a 4 or 5 win team. 7 seems that is a really high number for a team that has to play everybody in the AFC East. Philly and Dallas are going to be good. We'll see. The Giants were a playoff team last year, Washington, but even when the Giants and Washington are bad, they're generally not putrid. So, those teams are at least going to fight for wins, even if the talent levels are, not as good as some of these other teams. But the AFC East, man, it's going to be tough for them to go 1-3 in the AFC East. So this is an under. I really like this under at -130 again. This, like with the Chiefs, this seems like it should be -170. So I think they're underselling that, and I think this number should actually be 5.5. So I'll take the extra point in the -130. So
I just don't. I understand they're using algorithms and everything, and there are a lot of smart people that do this, but I just can't understand anybody looking at the Raiders' schedule and seeing 7 wins. I don't get it.
Yeah, they're not good. Their defense isn't good. Garoppolo's overrated. McDaniels is overrated. I think it pretty much just comes down to that.
Yep.
I do like Josh Jacobs, though, and I'm sure he'll be just itching to play after the contract dispute that continues to go on.
Yeah, he'll definitely be ready to sell all out, definitely.
But final thoughts on the NFC West, Jimmy?
I think there's going to be I think the Chargers and the Chiefs are going to play in a lot of marquee games, especially against those NFC East opponents, Philly and Dallas. I think when they play the Bills, I think that's going to be a big game, and the Dolphins as well. The Chiefs, when we talked about the other teams in the AFC, the Chiefs play a really tough schedule. Like, they got to play some really good teams, but I really believe the Chargers and the Chiefs are just going to be a step ahead of most of the AFC, which is saying a lot because the AFC is really, really good. But I think these two teams are very good. I'm curious to see how Russ and Sean Payton get along. It'll be fun to watch McDaniels and Garoppolo fail. So, but I think it's weird because you can't call it one of the best divisions of football because of how bad the two teams are. But I don't know if there's another division with two teams as good as the Chiefs and the Chargers.
I would say the AFC East comparatively with the NFC, the AFC East and the NFC West, based on the talent level in their conference, I think are applicable. Because I think Dallas is a good comp with the Chargers and Philly with to Kansas City coming off the Super Bowl run. But with those other two teams that you just look at and go, they're not going to be very good. They might hover around 7-8 wins, but they're not very good. So, I pretty much agree with you. The Chiefs are really good. The Chargers are good. Vegas and Denver they're just not. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with Denver if this is another bad year for them. I do think that Kansas City, when they play those big games, there's a real knee-jerk reaction sometimes. You'll get a lot of media attention on Kansas City with like, oh, they're done, burying dirt on them. And you'll see the odds come down for them. And that's, if you're going to find more value with Kansas City as a Super Bowl winner, that's the time to look for it. When they play Philadelphia, when they play Buffalo, because Kansas City's shown that they'll lose those regular season games, but they don't lose the playoff games. Yeah. And they've only lost 2?
Yeah.
In his entire... Jesus Christ, they've lost 2 playoff games in the 4 years he's been a starter? 5? No, they've lost 3 because they lost to Brady.
Yeah.
So, they're
It's
just...
a little crazy.
Yeah, they've been to the AFC Championship game every year. Patrick Mahomes has been there, and last year he was on one goddamn ankle, and they still won the thing. So, I don't know what the rest of the league's going to do with that.
Yeah, they are kind of like the opposite of the Bills, in which if they lose a marquee regular season game, it's like whatever. Like they don't seem to take any regular season game any more valuable or less valuable than any other regular season game. They're just Andy Reid just doing his thing, eating cheeseburgers, trying to get back to the playoffs. Like that's just what it is.
Well, it's always fun watching Andy Reid eat cheeseburgers. especially when you've bet money on him to be in situations where he'll want to eat cheeseburgers.
Yep.
So we can all eat some cheeseburgers together in that case.
That's
Thanks
for
for joining me here to wrap up the thanks for joining me to wrap up the AFC with the AFC West.
No place I'd rather be, brother.
And I would like to thank all of you for listening. We have our 3 previous podcasts with the East, the North, and the South. Those will be in the description below. For Jimmy Champ, I am Evan Belfiore. Thank you for listening to No Broken Legs.